He was a soldier lost in time, forgotten by the world, trapped in a jungle that would become his entire universe. In 1943, Shoichi Yokoi was just another Japanese Imperial Army soldier stationed on Guam. But when American forces invaded the island, everything changed. Suddenly, survival meant something entirely different. The battle was brutal. American troops systematically cleared the island, hunting down Japanese soldiers who refused to surrender. Most were killed. Some committed suicide. But Yokoi had another plan. Deep in Guam's dense jungle, he found a small cave. This would become his home. Not for weeks, not for months, but for decades. Yokoi was trained to believe that surrender was the ultimate dishonor. His military training had instilled a powerful code: fight until or die trying. Defeat was not an option. Surrender was worse than death. So he stayed hidden, alone, isolated from the world. Years passed, then decades. While the world moved on, Yokoi remained committed to his mission. He created a small underground shelter, learned to trap animals, wove clothes from tree bark and plant fibers, survived on whatever the jungle provided. His daily routine was disciplined, military precision applied to survival. He would hunt, repair his shelter, maintain his equipment, always listening, always watching, always believing the war continued. He survived using primitive but effective techniques. He trapped wild chickens, caught river shrimp, made tools from bamboo and stone, created crude fishing spears, maintained his physical fitness through daily exercises. But the most remarkable aspect of Yokoi's survival was his psychological resilience. He never lost hope, never believed the war was over. His training and personal commitment kept him going. 28 years passed, the world transformed, technology emerged, societies changed, entire generations lived and died, and Shoichi Yokoi remained in his jungle, unchanged. In January 1972, 2 local hunters discovered him. Imagine their shock. A man who looked like he'd stepped out of 1944, suddenly emerging from the wilderness. He was wearing clothes he had hand-woven from tree bark, lean, weathered, but alive. When captured, Yokoi reportedly said something that would become legendary. "I am sorry I did not realize that Japan had lost the war." His loyalty was absolute, his commitment unbreakable. He returned to Japan as a national curiosity, a living symbol of wartime dedication. People were fascinated. How could someone survive so long? How could he not know the war was over? Yokoi became more than a person. He became a story, to loyalty, to survival against impossible odds. He wrote a book about his experiences, appeared on television, became a minor celebrity, but he never seemed entirely comfortable in the modern world. About the power of belief, about what people can endure when they truly believe in something. From a soldier lost in the jungle to a symbol of an entire generation's resilience. Subscribe for more incredible stories. Yokoi's story connects far beyond his individual experience. It speaks to a broader human capacity for survival, for maintaining hope in the most challenging circumstances imaginable. His experience wasn't just about physical endurance, but about psychological fortitude. Each day was a battle against isolation, against the creeping doubt that might have broken a lesser spirit. The psychological mechanisms that allowed Yokoi to survive are as fascinating as his physical adaptations. His mind had created an entire world where the war continued, where his mission remained critical, where surrender was never an option. When he was finally discovered in 1972, the world had changed dramatically. The Japan he remembered no longer existed. Post-war reconstruction had transformed the nation. Technological revolutions had reshaped society. His return to Japan was not a simple homecoming. It was a complex psychological experience of reintegration. How does one reconcile decades of isolated survival with a rapidly modernizing world? Yokoi struggled. The media attention, the sudden celebrity status, the constant questions. These were perhaps more challenging than his years of jungle survival. Despite the challenges, Yokoi maintained remarkable dignity. He didn't see himself as a victim or a curiosity. Instead, he viewed his experience as a demonstration of duty, of commitment to a larger purpose. His military training had taught him that personal comfort was secondary to mission and honor. Interestingly, Yokoi didn't entirely reject the modern world. He adapted, albeit cautiously. Scientific and military researchers were fascinated by his survival techniques. How had he managed to live for 28 years with such limited resources? His ability to create tools, find food, maintain shelter, and preserve his physical and mental health became a subject of extensive study. Anthropologists noted how Yokoi had essentially created a micro-society of one. His daily routines, his self-made tools, his psychological strategies all represented a remarkable adaptation to extreme isolation. He had become both observer and participant in his own survival narrative. How could someone maintain absolute belief in a reality that no longer existed? Some researchers suggested that Yokoi's survival was not just about physical endurance, but about creating meaning in extreme isolation. His daily routines, his commitment to his perceived mission, provided psychological structure in a world that could have easily driven him to despair. Cultural historians saw Yokoi as a complex symbol of Japan's post-war experience. He represented both the incredible dedication of wartime generations and the challenging process of reconciliation and transformation that Japan underwent after World War II. How thin is the line between dedication and delusion? What allows some individuals to maintain hope and purpose in seemingly impossible circumstances? Yokoi's narrative became more than a personal story. When he returned to Japan, he found a nation that had completely transformed. The industrial landscape had erupted with technological innovations. Cities like Tokyo were no longer the modest urban centers he remembered, but sprawling metropolises of concrete and glass. Skyscrapers pierced the sky, bullet trains crisscrossed the countryside, and electronic devices were becoming ubiquitous. His family's reaction was complex. While they were overjoyed to see him alive, they also struggled to understand the man who had returned. He was not the young soldier who had left decades earlier, but a weathered survivor with habits formed in isolation. He spoke differently, moved differently, and saw the world through a lens shaped by 28 years of solitary existence. Sociologists were particularly intrigued by Yokoi's psychological adaptation. How does one maintain a sense of self when completely removed from society? His mental strategies of survival went beyond mere physical endurance. He had developed intricate psychological mechanisms that allowed him to preserve his identity, his sense of purpose, and his connection to a world that no longer existed. In interviews, Yokoi spoke about his jungle years with a remarkable detachment. He didn't romanticize his experience, nor did he present himself as a victim. Instead, he discussed his survival as a technical challenge, a mission that required strategic thinking, emotional control, and absolute commitment to his perceived duty. His daily routines in the jungle had been carefully structured. Every action was purposeful, from creating tools to gathering food, from maintaining his makeshift shelter to practicing military drills. These routines were not just survival mechanisms, but psychological anchors that prevented him from succumbing to despair or mental fragmentation. Interestingly, Yokoi's experiences connect with broader psychological studies on isolation and human adaptability. Researchers who studied polar explorers, astronauts, and long-term prisoners found remarkable parallels with his narrative. Medical professionals were fascinated by his physical health. Despite living in challenging tropical conditions with limited nutrition, Yokoi had managed to maintain remarkable fitness. His body bore the marks of his experienced scars, weathered skin, muscles developed through constant survival activities. The media portrayed him through multiple lenses. Some saw him as a heroic figure, a symbol of Japanese wartime dedication. Others viewed him as a curiosity, a living artifact from a bygone era. Yokoi himself was uncomfortable with these characterizations. He didn't seek fame or sympathy. He saw his experience as a continuation of his military service, a different kind of battlefield where survival itself was the mission. His return also coincided with Japan's complex post-war reconciliation process. Yokoi became almost inadvertently a living metaphor for this transformation mission, a man who represented traditional values yet was forced to adapt to radical change. The nation was transitioning from a war-devastated economy to becoming a global technological powerhouse. Companies like Sony, Toyota, and Panasonic were revolutionizing global industries. His adaptation was gradual but steady. He learned about new technologies, understood the massive societal shifts, and integrated into contemporary Japanese society without losing the core of his identity. This was not a simple process of assimilation, but a complex negotiation between his past and the present. Universities and research institutions sought his insights. His survival techniques, his psychological strategies, his understanding of extreme isolation became valuable research material. Anthropologists, psychologists, and military historians saw in Yokoi a unique case study of human endurance and adaptation. The broader philosophical questions remained: what maintains human purpose? How do individuals create meaning in seemingly meaningless circumstances? Yokoi's narrative suggested that purpose is not just externally defined, but can be internally constructed with remarkable tenacity. His later years were marked by quiet contemplation and unexpected contributions. He began lecturing at military academies and universities, sharing not war stories but lessons about psychological endurance. Young soldiers and students listened intently as he described survival, not as heroism, but as a systematic approach to challenge. In 1972, he was invited to speak at the Self-Defense Forces Training Center in Tokyo. His presentation wasn't about combat techniques, but about maintaining mental discipline under extreme conditions. Military psychologists were particularly impressed by his methodical approach to isolation and survival. Financially, Yokoi's life stabilized through modest speaking engagements and a small pension. He lived simply in a modest apartment in suburban Tokyo, maintaining the disciplined lifestyle he had developed during his jungle years. Every morning he would practice the same physical exercises he had performed in Guam, a ritual connecting his past and present. His family, initially strangers after decades of separation, gradually rebuilt their relationship. His siblings were astonished by his composure, his ability to integrate decades of isolation into a coherent life narrative. They recognized in him not a victim, but a remarkable example of human adaptability. Researchers continued studying his case for decades. Medical journals published multiple papers analyzing his physiological and psychological transformation, his metabolic adaptations, immune system resilience, and mental strategies became standard case studies in survival medicine. When media outlets offered substantial amounts for exclusive interviews, he declined, preferring to share his story through academic channels and controlled interactions. This restraint only enhanced his reputation as a man of principle. In his final years he became a quiet symbol of post-war Japanese reconstruction, not through dramatic gestures, but through steady, principled living. He embodied a generation's capacity to transform trauma into productive existence. On March 24, 1997, Hiro Yokoi passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 82. His death was mourned not just by his family, but by researchers and military historians, who saw in him a unique human document of survival and adaptation. His personal effects, the few tools he had crafted in the jungle, his preserved military documents, and the simple clothing he wore during his decades of isolation, were carefully preserved in the National Museum of Japanese History. Yokoi's legacy wasn't about heroism in the traditional sense. It was about systematic resilience, about creating meaning in seemingly impossible circumstances. His life demonstrated that survival is not just physical, but really psychological. His story continues to inspire generations of researchers, military strategists, and ordinary people seeking understanding of human potential. Hiro Yokoi was more than a soldier who survived 29 years in the jungle. Subscribe if this story interested you, and you want to hear more like it. A commemorative stamp was issued with his portrait, symbolizing his unique contribution to understanding human potential. Academic institutions worldwide began incorporating his story into research on human psychology, survival strategies, and post-traumatic adaptation. His methodical approach to maintaining mental and physical health during 29 years of jungle isolation became a critical case study in survival sciences. Young military cadets and survival experts studied his journals, which detailed intricate strategies for maintaining physical fitness, psychological stability, and hope during seemingly endless isolation. The Yokoi family established a small foundation dedicated to studying and preserving his legacy. They sponsored research scholarships for young psychologists and survival experts, ensuring his remarkable story would continue inspiring future generations. Visitors from around the world came to understand how one man survived against seemingly insurmountable odds. In 2010, a comprehensive documentary film titled Jungle Survivor: The Shoichi Yokoi Story was released, bringing his incredible narrative to global audiences. The film won several international documentary awards, and further solidified his place in modern historical understanding. Military historians noted that Yokoi represented more than an individual story. He symbolized an entire generation's capacity for adaptation, resilience, and transformation. Academic papers continue to reference his case, exploring not just his physical survival, but his remarkable psychological strategies. Researchers marvel at his ability to maintain hope, discipline, and purpose during decades of complete isolation. The National Museum of Japanese History maintains a dedicated section to Yokoi's artifacts, carefully preserving his jungle tools, military documents, and personal journals. These materials provide ongoing research opportunities for understanding human adaptation. Subscribe if this story interested you and you want to hear more like it. In Japan, he was often invited to speak at schools and universities, sharing wisdom about patience, adaptability, and maintaining inner strength during extreme isolation. International psychological journals published multiple studies analyzing his remarkable mental resilience. His younger siblings, who had believed him lost for decades, were overjoyed by his return. They helped him reintegrate into modern society, supporting him through the significant cultural and technological changes he had missed during his jungle years. Before his death, Yokoi wrote a memoir titled Waiting and Surviving, which became an international bestseller, translated into 17 languages. The memorial includes a replica of his jungle shelter and personal artifacts, serving as an educational exhibit about resilience and survival. Today, military training programs worldwide reference Yokoi's story as a critical case study in psychological endurance and strategic survival. His legacy continues to inspire soldiers, researchers, and ordinary individuals facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. The Yokoi family maintains his memory through annual remembrance events, ensuring that future generations understand the remarkable human capacity for survival and hope. Subscribe if this story interested you and you want to hear more like it.